I think you're really going to enjoy today's show, guys. Jeremy is the CMO of Milani Cosmetics, which is the second fastest growing brand in the top 10 mass cosmetics brands in the US, outpacing the category at over 30% year over year growth. Number one setting spray in the market, number one lip plumper, number two blush. Prior to that, he was CMO at MeUndies as well as Kapari, and spent 11 years prior to that on the executive side at Coty with Sally Hansen and other brands. Remember, if you do enjoy the show today, be a friend, tell a friend. Thanks, guys.
Explore the minds and marketing strategies behind today's winning brands and businesses. Tap into the power of the creator economy with Earned by Creator IQ. Here's Connor Begley.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Earned. I've got the CMO of amazing brand Milani Cosmetics here, Jeremy Lowenstein. Welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I think probably 70% of the people we have on are people I've known for a while. And it's always more fun to do that because then you've got so much history to go over. So it's great to have you on, my friend.
No, I agree. We're all so tightly connected in the beauty industry and have known each other for a long time. So I'm excited to do this with you.
It's funny because, we definitely, when we started the company, weren't planning on being so deep into a single category, any category, let alone the beauty category. And now
I think that's for a lot of us in our own careers. We didn't anticipate going so deep into a specific industry or category.
Yeah. I mean, that's your background, right? You kind of stumbled into it. Is that right?
I did. This has been over 20 years in the making at this point. So yeah, this was the happy accident.
I had another question, but why don't we hop in there? What's the happy accident? How did that happen?
I went to Boston University. I studied marketing. I've always had a passion for marketing. I actually thought I was going to be a lawyer at one point. And I really fell in love with marketing as an undergrad. And my original thought was I was going to be in the entertainment or sports marketing world. But I had an urge to get to New York City. And I have a cousin, Diane Ackley, who has worked at the Estée Lauder companies. She'd been there her whole career. She retired a few years ago after about 45, 48 years there. And it encouraged me to start as an intern. And I had an opportunity from an entertainment company and then from Lauder to come down as an intern. And I decided to go with Lauder. So, hey, this is going to be great. We'll see what happens. I know nothing about the beauty industry. I was typical male using Dove and anything that wasn't really like big beauty, especially luxury beauty. And they said, you're going to work at Aveda. And I said, I don't even know what that is. And I will never forget before coming down to New York for the summer, I went to what I thought was an Aveda store that ended up being an Aveda salon, and walking into the salon, looking at their planogram. And I said, why does anybody need all this product? So I went to Lauder for the summer and I lived at NYU. And my first day at Aveda, this is about 3 years after Lauder had bought it. And so we had an office in Soho. The rest of Aveda was still in Minneapolis. And I sat down at my desk and they said, have you ever tried our product? I was like, I don't even really understand why you have so many products. And the product closet and said, you need to try all of these things. And my summer project this was the year that metrosexual term was really starting to grow. And they said, can you do some research? We think we're a unisex brand, but are we? So I said, great. So I started putting together a market research plan for them, gave them an analysis. I was a sophomore in college. And I gave them a research plan for the end of the summer. I said, here's what I think you should do. You should, test products in your own stores. Tied up in a bow. I said, I'm going back to college. And they said, hey, we'd love for you to stay on and actually follow this through since we have no one working on a men's program. I got very lucky and ended up working for them as a freelance consultant for 2 years while I was finishing undergrad, and developed and launched what you now would see at Aveda as Pureformance for Men. So I was also that annoying kid in college then who was sitting in their forecasting class and learning how SKUs were forecasted and actually telling them at the same time, no, this is actually how it gets done. So that is how I stumbled into the beauty industry and really haven't left other than one small stint about 2 years ago at MeUndies here in LA. So other than that, I've spent my entire career in the beauty industry.
That's cool. I do think it's underrated in terms of building really deep specialization in a particular category. Often I'll see people that hop around, right, from industry to industry to industry. And now that I'm far enough into my career to know what 10 years of specialization does for you or 20 years of specialization does for you, it's much more impactful than people realize. And also to get 20 years in, like I'm 11 years into Tribe, but 15 years into digital marketing. to realize like how much I still have to learn, to be like, I mean, I'm 15 years in and I still don't know a lot.
I feel the same way. I feel like I'm learning every day. And I think what's really fascinating about being specifically in the beauty industry is I've had the privilege of working across brands, categories, distribution channels, and now media outlets. So I am constantly learning and challenging myself. If I get bored, I know I'm ready for a change. So while I've been in the industry for a long time, I think we get that opportunity to work across so many different variants, and you're constantly learning something new. Skincare is not the same as fragrance, nor is it the same as color cosmetics. From a functional perspective, I think beauty marketers are quite unique. And we used to live in this silo where classic CPG wouldn't think of us as traditional marketers. Mm-hmm. I actually think we're really unique that we are storytellers meet strategists meet sort of finance people, because there's a lot of human empathy and storytelling and emotion that you have to bring to this business that sometimes doesn't always exist in other categories. And I think now those categories are trying to pull beauty marketers in because we've connected with consumers in a very unique way.
You see it all the time where you'll see a CMO come in from another category and really struggle to understand what makes this particular market tick. And to be honest, like I'm far on the outside of what you guys are doing day to day in terms of building the story, building the narrative, right? We're just very heavy on the analytics and just measure, get to tell what's happening, but it's a very unique space. Let's hop into, so in terms of something you learned, this is not something you've learned, it's something you've been doing for a while, but I do think it's something that you've kind of dove into with some renewed vigor. And I think it's a big part of the reason people want to listen to this podcast is, you guys have seen kind of a surge in EMV over the last several months, right? Yep. I know that you're investing in it a lot more heavily, always invested in it. I think Milani's always been one of the best brands, but have more recently made some shifts in strategy that seem to be paying off. Then we'll talk a little bit about the Get Ready With Me campaign, et cetera. But what do you think is working? Like what's paying off there?
I think for me, I've been with Milani now for 2 years, and Milani is really a gem. And I think there's a lot that people don't know about this brand. It's a 22-year-old brand. Mm-hmm. And when I come into a brand, it's not about what's broken. It's about how do you harness the power of what made it get to where it is today. And I wanted to take a step back. Our founders are on our board. What inspired them to launch the brand? And what was that fairy dust or magic that brought it to the consumer and has kept it relevant for this long? And there are two qualities to this brand, and part of its brand purpose. One was democratizing prestige beauty. So why does access to high-performing product have to be limited to channels based on price point? So our goal is to be able to offer that to everybody. So cut back on packaging, focus on product and formula and payoff. And then second is serving the underserved, which is why the brand started. It was originally started to develop shades for Black women. That was the original thesis for the brand. Mm-hmm. And over time, the brand has become the leading multicultural brand in mass and color. And so fast forward to today, when I joined, I wanted to go back to that and understand what makes the brand tick and have my team really laser focused on that and helping to tell those two stories that can play together. And now where we sit within the consumer world is there's a strong affinity for Milani with the Hispanic consumer, with the Latina consumer. When it comes to strengthening EMV, there are a few things that we've been doing. One is going deeper with our creator relationships and, having great partners like your team and other, social agencies and PR agencies that we work with really help us develop strong, meaningful relationships with creators at all levels is really important. And part of what I think is important when I hate the word sourcing creators, but it's when are you starting those relationships is looking for the authenticity in their relationship with the category and with the brand itself. Because I've found in my past, celebrities were the creators back then. Now you have the creators. So we've always sort of played this way, whether you call them spokespeople, creators, influencers. I've always found that those who have a history with the brand organically become the best spokespeople. So what has helped us over the past few months is building those deeper relationships with creators and also being consistent with them. The retention play, just like D2C, is important on the creator world. How do you continue to work with them, get those creators deeper into your brand evolution and development, let them help tell the story for you in their own words to their community?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I love that aspect of leaning into what the brand's heritage is rather than trying to kind of recreate, right, or start new. I know that's something that when I interviewed Winnie Park, the CEO of Forever 21, she talked a lot about that and talked a lot about the heritage of Forever 21 and where it came from, what it meant, these kinds of things. On the multicultural front, it's funny. When we first started the company, we were trying to hire a data scientist. And so we put up job postings on what the top 5 math schools were in the world, right? So it was like Cambridge, Oxford, Stanford, Harvard, whatever. We ended up getting like 300 applications out of the UK for this one role, which was crazy at the time. And so we sent like the top candidates some data, like here's a bunch of social data, tell us what you find. And we didn't give them really a lot of prompts. And one of them who ended up hiring, one of the things he looked at was like the choice of skin tone emoji by brand and then mapped that. And what you could find was like, Milani was very much in the middle, right? Those kind of middle tones versus other brands were in different positions. It was one of the most fascinating ways to analyze like who is the community of a brand, what are the demographics of a brand. So you talked in your interview with Glossy about your Get Ready With Me kind of Milani campaign, about this dupe culture. And really, I think dupes kind of get the name just sounds bad when in reality, it's like, hey, we can provide the same amount of value at a much lower price. And that was a big part of what I think fueled NYX in the early days was we're an alternative to Mac. If you want to buy Mac, but you don't have the money, you can buy NYX and it's just as good. So talk to me about how you've leaned into that more recently with Milani, what's worked, what hasn't, what the impact of that has been from a brand perspective too.
Sure. So I'll tackle this on 2 fronts, one around the dupe and one around also the conversation piece also. So we'll start with the dupe piece. You're right. The term dupe or duplicate it sounds like a copycat. I think that's had a negative connotation. I think for those of us who've been in the industry long enough know that, especially on cosmetics or any really category, it takes 12 to 18 months to develop and launch new products. I think where Milani has always been at the forefront is developing and delivering prestige quality to the mass consumer. That is the equity and heritage of this brand. In order to do that, we partner with some of the best suppliers in the world who also supply some of the prestige brands that are also out there that we're competing with. And what that allows us to do is see and talk about the trends that the prestige brands are seeing at the same time. So we are able to come out with product within the same relative time frame as a prestige brand. So I think for me, it's been exciting to say, hey, you want to call us a dupe brand, have at it. We are actually launching what we believe is on trend at the right time and the right place for our consumer based off of what we know he or she is looking for and what we're hearing from our supplier partners. And I think the acceleration of speed to market and this gap between fast followers of mass to prestige and also the accessibility of product across channels. I don't think consumers trade up or down. I just think they trade around at this point. Consumers are verbalizing and articulating, hey, I bought this from Milani that looks similar to this brand. And they perform the same and it's a fourth of the price. So let me go buy 4 of these in every shade that I like versus 1 here. So who really are telling those stories are the creators and influencers. I don't think it's the brand's job to talk about that. We're doing what we believe is bringing prestige quality products to mass and also designed for the multicultural consumer for all skin tones. Where we get to tell those stories is leaning into conversations. Again, this goes back to your question around building EMV and strengthening our position there. Is sometimes it's hard for brands, especially indie brands. We are still an indie brand. We are the only independently owned brand in the top 10 of mass color. Everyone else is a public company or a multinational or a conglomerate. It's hard for us to create new conversations. So my challenge to the team is what conversations are actually always happening in the social world and how does a brand insert themselves and either participate or make it their own? So the Get Ready with Milani concept came from the team after seeing the Get Ready with Me hashtag being used as one of the most used across all social platforms. We said, how convenient that me and Milani both start with M. So let's lean into it. And we just started designing organic campaign for that and said, what else is happening at the moment? That can be an evergreen concept for us. And we had we leaned into the clean girl summer, the 5-minute face trend, and we developed influencer kits and started seeding them out and talking about our positioning of use Milani for everything you need, from the primers to our setting sprays to our foundations, blushes, and mascaras. And out of that has come amazing content. And to date, we've seen videos that have been tagged with GRW Milani have had over 47 million views or so, pretty much all organic. So I will take that as a win for Milani.
100%. I mean, people really, in some ways, one of the things that's hard is like views are views or impressions are impressions. It's like, they're not made the same, right? Like an organic earned impression will be much more impactful than like a paid 100%. Impression, obviously. And so 47 million organic is a ton. I mean, that's just a massive, massive coverage. Congrats on that. That's really exciting. And I love that concept, which is like, you don't have to create the conversation. And frankly, most brands don't. The vast majority of brands are just not like, you just can't move the needle, because what moves the needle is culture moves the needle, right? Like people are moving the needle. You don't really get to decide. And so instead saying like, okay, let's fast follow on what's happening right now in culture and lean into that. I love conceptually.
That's really where our No Filter Just Milani campaign came from. We saw the conversation happening around pushback around artificial filters, essentially beauty filters. And my personal belief has always been about embracing who you are and showing up as your best self. And makeup gives you that opportunity to do that. So the No Filter Just Milani campaign was just about that. This is our position. We don't retouch. We can say all of our imagery is unretouched. And we inserted our product of our Conceal and Perfect foundation as that, hey, this is the best way to start. Show up as your best self, use our product, and that will get you to the best version of who you are and how you want to show up each and every day. You don't need a digital filter to superimpose something on you that's just not reality.
Yeah, 100%. So I want to kind of take a quick pivot and talk a little bit more about your career specifically. Okay. So there's a few aspects we're going to hit. I want to talk about you being a teacher, because I've always thought about doing that myself, number one. Okay. But I think one of the other things I want to touch on is you did make this pivot, right? So you mentioned like we're the only indie brand in the top 10. And you made a very intentional pivot away from Estee Lauder and Coty and into the kind of independent brand world with Kapari, MeUndies, and now Milani. What made you decide to make that pivot, and what's different about operating in that environment versus, say, the more corporate environment?
I've loved all of my experiences, and I have learned something different at each one of them. Estee Lauder, very different company from where it is today, but was really my training ground. And from my internship to my full-time position there, I learned a lot. And I think I was also lucky because Aveda was still considered an indie brand. I was there, like I said, 3 years post-acquisition, and we got to pilot a lot of very cool things. And I learned a lot about product development, marketing, from a channel perspective, freestanding, owned and operated stores. I got the chance to go work in them. Our distributors who worked on our salon business. And then Aveda was the pilot brand for D2C. It wasn't even called D2C. That wasn't a thing. It was just e-com. And D2C was not a term. I remember the Aveda website when I started as one long scrolling page. And I really had the privilege of working with some amazing pioneers in the beauty industry for e-commerce. And they said, hey, you're young. Can you go help them work on path to purchase and what this website thing looks like? And I thought that was very cool. And then I went to Coty, and same thing. While Lauder gave me my training wheels, essentially, Coty took them off, and I grew up very quickly there. And I was there for 11 years and got to see the company grow up as well, from what was predominantly a fragrance company into a multi-category powerhouse. And lived through a lot of changes there, from acquisitions of brands and integrations. I lived through the P&G integration.
Oh, I heard that was fun.
that was an experience. I took a lot away from it. But again, I had never lived through anything like that. And to be at a summit for the first time where we were the top leaders from both P&G and Coty were coming together to talk about how we are going to work well together. And just I learned, and I got to work on mass fragrance there. Licensing deals, again, had never touched that before either. So I had to learn how to read contracts and negotiate that piece and work with a third-party entity that actually owned the brand equity. And how do you play there and work on checks and balances? And then working on the post-merger integration of Sally Hansen, working across those categories, and eventually running the brand globally and also getting to relaunch it and going back to its heritage. I'm a firm believer in understanding where a brand came from, because that is its roots and it will continue to resonate with the core consumers as long as you sort of stay true to who you are and just contemporize yourself. And that was an amazing opportunity as well. And also, if I go back to Aveda, even from an organics and natural movement, I got to learn a lot there as well, post-consumer recycled materials and sustainably sourced ingredients that no one was talking about. Launching a hairspray that had a carbon offset program that people couldn't even explain what a wind turbine was. Now I know a lot about them. But what made me make the move is I wanted to try my hand at something different. Let's go from the 22,000 person company that is multi-layered and a huge matrix of approvers and decision makers to a founder-led brand like Kopari or MeUndies, where the founders are there, have a vision. And I saw it as my job to not only be a marketer, but help bring their vision to life and help them take the brand to the next level. And I learned a lot in that way, what it meant to go do fundraising. Never lived through that either. So I had
that's fun too.
Yeah, it is. It's like working with bankers and investors. I made a lot of great connections, and I have been very intentional about where I go to play, whether it's category, distribution channel, size of brand, size of business, and employee base. Kopari got me back to the prestige world, working with Sephora's and Ulta's and Nordstrom's, but also back to D2C, which I hadn't really touched since my Aveda days and obviously had changed a lot. And then working on Amazon. And that took me to MeUndies, totally different category, same skill set, but storytelling, working with the founder and helping to continue to push the brand forward, but full D2C with a custom built website. And I think where I am with Milani is kind of like the perfect balance of all of that. You know, we're privately owned. We have great partners at Griffin Investors up in San Francisco from private equity. The brand is still thought of as an indie brand, 22 years older. There's a foundation there. And around the table, you know, I'm lucky to have a great boss who I got to work with, who I worked with at Coty, Mary Von Prague, and George Cleary, who's our chairman, down to my peers, you know, Kelly Sobel's head of sales. Like, we all come from the industry or have done something like this before. And it's like adulting around a table and saying, okay, we know how to do this. We have a mission. Let's partner together and just drive forward. That's what makes this brand, for me at least from an experience, very special, because we are building and growing and strengthening a brand in the marketplace with consumers and know how to build the internal infrastructure because we've all lived in big and done small, and we know how to push that forward and take away some of the red tape that typically would live in a big company, but start to implement processes that we know will help build the brand in a more consistent and stable way.
Yeah. It's nice to be able to kind of run the playbook again, you know what I mean? And to work with people that you've worked with so consistently in the past. Yeah.
And it's interesting that the foundations of the playbooks don't change. The tools that you use to execute have changed a little bit. And that's what's been fun for me as a marketer, and is always our challenge, is the tools that are at my disposal have evolved. But now I get to take them from a 360 approach and say, how do I show up at the right time at the right place for my consumer using all these mediums that are at my fingertips in a meaningful way?
100%. Actually, I want to dive into that a little bit. So one of the concepts we've observed, and we're kind of labeling it creator-led marketing, but really what it is historically you worked with influencers for exposure. You sent them product, you partnered with them, they drove exposure for your brand. Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways what we're seeing now is their assets now becoming the primary way that brands are doing storytelling. They're building around the assets that are being provided and integrating them into, it's like when I'm on TikTok, I think almost every ad I see is like from a creator, right? It's a creator telling me about Milani rather than Milani telling me about Milani. Is that something that you've observed change? And how do you manage that? You know, in some ways, some loss of control around messaging that maybe you had in the past.
Yeah, I think relinquishing control is every marketer's worst nightmare. I think we want to, because we see ourselves along with the rest of the internal team as being the stewards of the brand.
Yeah,
I think creators and influencers do play an integral role in helping to build a brand. Mm-hmm. But I think they play a specific role that there are some things they can't do. And I've had multiple roundtables with creators, and they will readily admit please do not depend on us to build your brand and tell your story. That is the brand's job. And what creators that we've worked with help us do is, yes, they help demo the product, but they are able to articulate in a meaningful way in their own voice of why they love it and why the brand resonates with them. And I go back to my earlier statement of why it's important to partner with creators who are authentic to your brand, because there was already a relationship between them and the brand itself. And now you're just giving them the forum to do it potentially in a bigger way, because this is a symbiotic relationship here. They're helping us and we're helping them. And I like that because they're the ultimate consumer and we'll help them amplify as well. But I do still think so that they're a core tenet and pillar of activation and also conversation creation. But for me, the brand still plays a role, because in order for a brand to have longevity, these concepts of legacy brands, which I think sometimes indie brands try to give legacy brands a bad rap. Legacy brands to me are so critical because something that they have done has stood the test of time. Yep. And it's important for a brand to be the ultimate communicator of their message, their point of view, their competitive advantage. Like, why did they deserve to last for 50 years? Mm-hmm. And a brand has to continue to do that. Like I said, the way in which that story is told may change, or the medium, but I think they both play a role, brand storytelling, and then the creators helping that story come along as well.
So one of the new storytelling elements that's on the rise is short form video. And obviously that's, is popularized by TikTok.
You mean this thing that we used to call a commercial? 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds. You mean this thing where like now,
I've never heard that.
Platforms are having this thing where they're aggregating themselves. It's that thing, it's called cable. We can just change the name. It's fine. Short form video.
Oh my God. That is too funny. I've never heard that.
Half this conversation is getting my hair cut like a year or two ago. And the stylist said to me, he was like, I'm having a real conundrum. He's like, there are so many streaming platforms. He's like, there's Disney Plus and Netflix and Hulu. He's like, I just wish someone would put them all together. I said, we had that. It was called cable. But that's fine. So yes, short form video, also what we called commercials.
Oh my God. I can't remember his name. He's this tech writer, but basically talks about how almost all industries, all technology industries go through it. He calls it the great bundling and then the great unbundling, right? And it's this kind of undulating thing where it's like, hey, I want everything together, but then it all kind of sucks. And it's like, okay, split it up.
Options.
Then you go to options, too many options. Like
paralysis and nope, bundle it back for me, give me a discount. And now we come back with the same thing.
Yeah. But the commercials, like short form video, that's called a commercial. Like, oh shit. Anyways, so let's talk about commercials then. So if you look at the data, obviously TikTok had its rise. It's built around that. I think specifically, if you look at the numbers for Instagram and YouTube, which the other two, that's kind of the three-headed horseman in this space. YouTube Shorts are up over 100% year over year, while YouTube long form is up 1%. Instagram feed is up 4%. Reels are up 120 something percent, and stories are only up 18%. So clearly that's where all the resources are being put. And you're seeing upticks in both usage on YouTube and usage on Instagram as well. They're both up like 20 to 30% over the last 6 months on a per user basis. So for you, again, you've been creating commercials for a long time, but I think the pace at which you have to create these is much higher. What are the challenges around kind of embracing this short form video revolution that's kind of happening right now?
I mean, we've all been doing it. And whether they're brand created or creator led, I think consumers they can't get enough content. So you have to constantly change to stay relevant and fresh, lean into the things that are working and performing. But at some point, there is quicker wear out. So yes, I jokingly call them commercials, but when we used to do commercials, we would do a 15 and a 30-second spot, and they would last for 1 to 2 years on television. I think the demand today is, like I said, for fresher content more often. And I think that has what has helped the rise of the creator business. And it can't just be on the brand to constantly create and recut. But I think there are opportunities, and as these platforms are coming up with tools, changing the sounds that go into it, the supers that go on top of the video, so you can make small edits to it to make it look fresh again and bring that back to the surface. So I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's also, for me, what's important, that I work with the team on is all of these platforms play, again, a different role in where the consumer is in her journey or his journey in their discovery and ultimately, hopefully, purchase of a product. So making sure you have the right type of content, not necessarily the length, but also what are they talking about? Is YouTube more for tutorials, and you have TikTok for sort of entertainment meets education, and Instagram is kind of a little bit of both, but a little bit, it's always just been more about product shots, photography, and Reels now coming into play, and I think finding its home, but knowing what's the purpose, because not everything will resonate the same way. The audiences are slightly different. It is a little bit of, again, an art and a science there.
Yeah, I do not envy. I mean, I'm on my own content journey. Our company's on our own content journey, but man, I just have not gotten to be good at creating video. I just it seems like a black box to me. Like, obviously we monitor it all the time, but doing it myself, it's just, God, that sounds.
Yeah, I give creators and, our own internal team, creative team, our marketing team, a lot of credit. It's hard. It is hard to constantly storytell.
Yeah. Well, let's do one fun kind of end of show question. So probably unsurprising to you, I could occasionally be somewhat of a pain to my teachers, and you used to be a teacher. So you were a professor at one of the most prestigious fashion universities in the world, FIT. Yeah. So I'd love to do two things, right? On a more serious note, I've thought about being a teacher at some point, or guest lecturing, that kind of stuff. I've done some guest lecturing, et cetera. So tell me about kind of what's the process like for creating a curriculum, right? And what made you do it for so long? And then also, what's your worst story? Who was your most painful student that you had over the 4 years?
So yes, I was an adjunct professor at FIT for 4 years. And that was actually one of the most exciting things for me. It truly felt like an accomplishment. And for me, it was a way of giving back to the beauty and fashion community at large. The way it actually happened was I was put in touch with Virginia Bonafilio, who is the chairwoman of the undergrad beauty department at FIT for beauty and fragrance. And I went to meet with her originally about being a mentor. And she said to me, I won't forget this, I was sitting in her office and she goes, "You're a marketer. Do you want to teach?" I said, I actually always thought about teaching, but I had never actually done it. I had also had guest lectured here and there. She goes, "I have an opening. I need a course that needs to be taught in the fall." And this was right at the end of the second half term. And she goes, "But there's no curriculum." And she goes, "But the course is already in the book and people are signing up. And it's called The Business of Beauty." And I said, "Sure." And I spent the summer researching textbooks. I actually reached out to my marketing professors from undergrad. And I spent the summer reading textbooks, figuring which one I wanted to do. And what was important for me, the premise of the class, the way I built the curriculum was, so it was called The Business of Beauty. And my sort of byline under there was, the fundamental principles of marketing taught through the lens of a beauty marketer. And why that was important, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is I had this notion that beauty marketers were being pigeonholed and people thought we were different, that we didn't really have the classical marketing training that everybody else did. And I felt like it was my responsibility for the next generation of beauty marketers who are coming up through this university to give them the tools and the access to those principles, those fundamentals, as well as other people, and also dispel a lot of the myths of, do I just sit in my office all day and play with nail polish? The answer is no. And so that was the structure of the curriculum. Every week, it was a night class from 6 to 9 at night, or 6 to 10, I don't even remember anymore, but which made it hard for me because I was working full time. But I did my MBA part-time, so I knew what that was like. And I wanted to help guide these juniors and seniors, as well as continuing ed students who are in there, help them understand what it meant to be a marketer in the beauty industry and decipher if that was actually where their passion was. Maybe it was actually in creative. Maybe it was, on the product development side. Maybe it was on the agency side and not on the brand side. And so as part of the curriculum, because I worked at Coty at the time, I had access to a lot of people from a lot of different functions. And I got to bring them in. One of my very close friends and former peers, Angela Hall, who was head of creative at Coty, I brought her in to guest lecture. I brought people in from my product team, from my US marketing team, so they understood the commercial aspects. I brought people in from the production side of creative and really just opened their eyes to what was happening. And for me, their capstone projects was the same way I did it in undergrad. My undergrad, it was super rigorous. Junior year, everything was team-based. And we were put on a team and we had to actually write a business plan and launch a new product, come up with the P&L, the 5-year P&L, establish where the factory was going to be, all the operational pieces, create an ERP from an IT perspective. So I took that and stripped it back and said, okay, guys, you're going to be on teams now. And I want you to bring a product to market, do the market research with peers and students, write the concept. How would you go to market? What would your hypothetical budget look like? What retail channels would you go into? And why I did that, aside from having the experience of writing a small business plan, was the skills that Boston University gave me, not only around the education piece, but the cross-functional teamwork, I think set me up for success in my career, because it taught me, A, what else was going on, but how to work better as a team. You don't always get to choose your team. So how do you work better together and work through conflict resolution, and then ultimately bring something to the table? And I would have them present at every stage of the process where they were at, what they learned, and ask for guidance. So I really loved it. And I definitely see myself going back into the teaching world at some point. It's very rewarding. What's actually been more rewarding, I wouldn't say there's like a scary part to it. I'd say actually the flip of the rewarding part is I have now seen some of my students out in the beauty world. One who's been on brand side, she's been at 2 different brands now in marketing roles. And I will tell you, I was doing editor desk sides not so long ago, a couple months ago in New York. And I sat down and an editor showed up and she said, "Do you remember me?" I said, "Well, your name looks very familiar." She goes, "That's because I was your student about 10 years ago."
Oh my gosh.
And she's now a leading beauty editor. And I had oh my God. So here I am now pitching my brand and product for innovation to my former student. And she jokingly said to me at the end of the meeting, she goes, "That was a very well thought out PowerPoint presentation. Have you ever thought about teaching?" So I've definitely had my full circle moments.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
So, yeah.
Oh man.
That is my teaching story, and I love it, and I can't recommend it enough because they are ultimately the future of this industry.
Yeah, I mean, 100%, right? I think that is so cool. That's fun. Well, I really appreciate you taking out the time, Jeremy. Congrats on all the success, both personally and with Milani. I'm excited to see where you guys take the brand.
Me too.
Keep killing it. It's
an exciting ride, and it's not over yet.
There you go. All right. Bye, Jeremy.
Thanks, Connor.
Be a friend, tell a friend, and subscribe. Earned by Creator IQ. Creator IQ is your all-in-one solution to grow, manage, scale, and measure your influencer marketing program. Ready to unlock the power of the creator economy? Get started with a demo today at creatoriq.com.